That night, the moment I stepped into the Grand Adams estate on the outskirts of Boston, I knew I was an unwelcome guest. As the heavy front door shut behind me, the sharp contrast between the winter air outside and the warmth of the mansion pricked at my skin. Crystal chandeliers blazed above the marble hall, their light so bright that my shadow stretched long across the polished floor. And yet, the air in that glittering space felt as cold as ice. Father lounged on the sofa, phone in one hand, speaking proudly with my brother as if I weren't there. When he finally noticed me, the words that left his mouth were colder than the marble beneath my feet. "Morgan, you're here. Sit down if you must. We're busy talking business." His tone was a blade that cut me out of the family circle. Mother kept her gaze fixed on the wine swirling in her glass. My sister stayed glued to her phone, not bothering to look up. Under the dazzling lights, I felt myself being pushed back into the same role I had known since childhood, a daughter treated as if she were invisible. The fire in the hearth crackled. Generations of Adams men stared down at me from their portraits on the wall, their stern eyes seeming to say, "You do not belong here." What burned inside me was a mixture of loneliness and rising anger. But that heat began to harden into something else. Resolve. Never again will I let this family bind me. I will build an empire that will force my father to finally open his eyes. Later that night, when the cheerful voices from the living room had faded, I rose quietly from my chair. The hallway shimmered in the glow of the hearth, shadows wavering on the walls. Each step on the carpeted staircase let out a faint wooden creak beneath the pile. At the far end of the upstairs corridor stood my father's study. As a child, I had been warned never to cross that door. Tonight, the sight of the solid mahogany door awakened that old fear in my chest. I grasped the knob carefully and pushed the door open without a sound. The air inside was cool and dry. Tall shelves lined with economic journals and thick binders stood in order along the wall. Scattered handwritten notes lay across the desk. When I switched on the banker's lamp, its green-tinted light cast deep shadows across the papers. My eyes caught on a weather-worn leather folder resting at the corner of the desk. I picked it up without thinking. Inside the cover was a red stamp that read, "Confidential." My heartbeat quickened. Inside were share transfer contracts and memos about executive reshuffles, evidence that my father had been secretly negotiating to sell part of Adam's software to outside investors. The more I read, the clearer it became that my father and brother had been steering the company's future behind closed doors. I clenched the pages under the lamp's glow and bit my lip. 10 years ago, these same men had laughed at my proposals. Now I saw how much they had hidden from me. Yet, along with the anger, a quiet flame sparked in my chest. This evidence will be my trump card. Tomorrow, everything changes. I turned off the lamp, eased the door shut, and heard the faint clink of a glass somewhere down the corridor. No one had discovered me yet. With the weight of the folder pressed against my chest, I slipped back to my room. Outside, the wind stirred the trees, casting long, restless shadows along the hallway, a sign that the storm had yet to break. I am Morgan Adams, 32 years old, a daughter of the prestigious Adams family, yet treated for most of my life as if I barely existed. On Thanksgiving night, I returned to this Boston mansion for the first time in a decade. The marble foyer and the crimson carpeted staircase still loomed over me with the same oppressive grandeur I remembered as a child. The more dazzling the house appeared, the more painfully I felt that I had no true place in it. 10 years earlier, I had been a student at MIT, obsessed with writing code since I was 12. I still remember showing my first little app to my father as a girl. His only comment was, "Interesting, but just a toy." That single remark stayed lodged in my heart. At MIT, I worked harder than anyone. My senior thesis won the highest marks in the department. I truly believed a day would come when my father would acknowledge my worth. That day seemed to arrive in the spring of my 22nd year. I had developed a new cloud integration business plan and was granted a chance to present it before the board of directors. The morning of the meeting, I stood before the mirror in my suit. In my eyes there was both excitement and nerves, because for the first time I would face my father not as a child, but as a potential business partner. The boardroom was lined with thick carpet and a long mahogany table surrounded by my father's longtime allies. Outside the windows, spring sunlight glowed over the Boston skyline. Inside, the atmosphere was as cold as winter ice. With trembling fingers, I advanced my slides, describing the future market. Customers no longer wanted stability alone. Data integration would decide the winners. With cloud technology, we could expand our customer base dramatically. I believed in every word I spoke. My voice carried passion. Perhaps too much, perhaps a little too fast. Yet the expressions across the table remained unmoved. The old directors looked down at their papers. One stifled a yawn. Near the end of my presentation, my father glanced at his watch. That small motion froze my heartbeat. "That's enough," he said at last, leaning back in his chair. "This is an academic's hobby. Our clients want security, not risky experiments." Those words cut through me like a blade of ice. Months of work and hope were crushed in a single instant. Mother tried to protest gently. "Harold, it's her dream. At least hear her out." But a sharp look from father silenced her. My brother Jason leaned back with a smirk. "A dreamer's fairy tale." My younger sister Catherine sighed, bored, tapping at her phone. The room fell into heavy silence. Heat welled up behind my eyes, but I clenched my teeth, refusing to let the tears fall. In that silence, I slowly closed my laptop. Inside, I carved a vow. I will leave this house. Never again will I be looked down upon. I will build an empire that forces my father to see. Back in my room, I tore off my jacket. Beyond the window, Boston shone in the spring sun, but it felt distant, like a world I could not yet reach. The next morning, I left a short note for my mother. "Don't worry, I will come back, but next time, it will be on my terms." With only a single suitcase, I left home. As the taxi carried me toward the airport, the streets blurred past the window, not from tears, but from the storm of emotions that made it impossible to focus my eyes. Passing through the departure gate, I could almost hear my father's dismissive voice echo behind me. "Just a toy." That memory hardened my resolve even further. I left Boston behind that day with only one suitcase, an old laptop, and a single promise burning inside me. I will prove them wrong. I landed in San Francisco, a city buzzing with dreams, ambition, and just as many broken hopes. But what greeted me was not a shining future. It was a damp little apartment that smelled of mildew. The window panes were cracked. Winter drafts stabbed through the gaps. At night, I heard couples fighting in the unit next door and something scurrying across the attic above. There was almost no furniture, just a second-hand desk and a narrow bed. Inside the fridge sat instant noodles and the cheapest coffee I could afford. Still, I powered up my laptop. By day, I worked the cash register at a grocery store or scrubbed floors as a cleaner to pay rent. By night, I coded until my eyes burned. And at dawn, I slipped into the public library to devour the newest research papers. On weekends, I attended free startup meetups, listening to others pitch their dreams, telling myself, next time, it'll be my turn. Reality was merciless. Again and again, investors shook their heads. "Impressive idea, but I don't see the profit. You're talented as an engineer, but you're not CEO material. This is more of a hobby than a business." One investor even chuckled and said, "If your father's willing to back you, then maybe I'd consider it. You're Harold Adams' daughter, right? As a hobby, sure, it's cute." Those words burned like acid. The same dismissal. A toy, a hobby, now echoed in another man's voice. My stomach knotted in fury. Teammates began dropping out one by one. "Sorry, I can't pay rent anymore. I have to quit. I can't afford to chase dreams. I need a real job." Some apologized through tears. Others slammed the door in frustration and never came back. Each empty chair made the tiny office feel hollower. In the end, only I remained. On winter nights, I curled up on the bare concrete floor, shivering in the cold, whispering to myself, "Can I really finish this? Will this all remain nothing more than the academic's hobby my father mocked?" Whenever doubt crept in, the memory of that MIT boardroom returned. My father's dismissive eyes, the smirk on my brother's face. That memory lit the fire in me all over again. "Fine. Laugh all you want. I won't stop until the day I prove I was right." The breakthrough came in my third year. A small local medical tech startup decided to pilot my cloud integration system. They had only 10 employees and a shoestring budget, but they trusted me. The early months were rough. Glitches everywhere. Late-night emergency calls. I often stumbled into their office half asleep, debugging until sunrise. "Emmy, you should go home and rest," they'd plead. I'd shake my head. Not until it's fixed. If we quit now, everything falls apart. After countless sleepless nights, the system finally stabilized. Workflows improved dramatically. 6 months later, they told me with shining eyes, "We couldn't have come this far without your system." That single success ignited my determination and almost brought me to tears. Word spread quickly. Soon, real investors began to notice. Our first funding round came through at last. We replaced the broken chairs in the office with new ones. Teammates returned. Pizza boxes stacked up on late-night coding sessions. And for the first time I thought, I'm no longer alone. I still hid my true name. If I revealed I was Morgan Adams, my father's shadow would follow me everywhere. So I chose a new identity. Emmy Stone. Even from cold stone, we can build the future. I told myself as I signed the papers under that name. Neither investors nor clients suspected the truth. To the world, Emmy Stone was just a mysterious female founder making waves in Silicon Valley. 10 years passed. Our company, Everest Corp, grew to be worth over $20 billion and signed contracts with major IT players worldwide. Magazines and analysts wondered aloud, who is she really? I never answered. Keeping that secret was my final shield, the key to completing the revenge I had planned so long ago. If you were in Morgan's place, could you keep your true identity hidden from your own family while you waited for the perfect moment to strike back? Tell us in the comments. The taxi's headlights swept across the dark suburbs of Boston as I returned, not as the humiliated girl who had fled 10 years ago, but as a woman who had built her own empire. Yet I kept my smile in check. The final act had not been played. The curtain had not yet fallen. The iron gates of the Adams estate loomed ahead, black against the winter night. Once they had felt like bars of a cage keeping me out. As the car rolled through, a draft of cold air slipped through the window gap and brushed my cheek. Far ahead, the mansion's windows glowed softly, Christmas lights blinking among the trees, casting long shadows across the snow-dusted lawn. When the taxi stopped before the grand entrance, the gravel crunched under my heel. A maid opened the door with a polite but distant smile. "Welcome home, Miss Morgan." Her tone carried duty, not warmth, just as it had when I was a child. Inside, the marble floor of the hall reflected the golden light of the chandelier overhead. Portraits of stern-faced ancestors lined the walls, their eyes judging me like silent jurors. As I slipped off my coat, a coarse tension crawled up my spine. This house has never welcomed me. Tonight is no exception. In the living room, the fireplace crackled. Father, Harold Adams, sat deep in a leather sofa, sharing wine and laughter with my brother Jason. The warmth of the fire and the glow of the table could not hide the frost in their voices. When Father noticed me, he spoke in a low, indifferent tone. "Morgan, you chose an odd time to return. Sit if you like. We are in the middle of a business discussion." His words cut like a cold blade. Mother swirled her wine, refusing to meet my eyes. Catherine scrolled her phone with a faint, mocking smile. The old role of being the invisible daughter tried to close in around me again. But I was no longer the Morgan they remembered. A quiet flame of certainty burned in my chest. Dinner began. Relatives filled the table with chatter and laughter. Silver cutlery gleamed, and the aroma of roasted turkey filled the room. Yet all that cheer felt to me like the calm before a storm. Jason raised his glass with a loud laugh. "So, Dad, what's Morgan been doing all these years? Still playing the little academic?" The uncle beside him burst out laughing, and others joined in. Saving the world with theories? Or still writing pretty slides? Catherine aimed her phone's camera at me with a smirk. Same old Morgan. 10 years gone, and still nothing to show for it. Their words rippled with laughter. But to my ears, every chuckle sounded like the scrape of blades. Mother added lightly, as if for sport. "Seats at this table are for those who contribute to the family. Others are just guests." Another uncle quipped. "Then Morgan's here only for the turkey." The table roared with laughter again. I kept my smile steady as I carved a slice of turkey, but inside I began the countdown. Go on, keep laughing. The higher they climb in their pride, the sharper the fall will be. Jason lifted his glass higher and jeered. "Morgan, you left us, yet here you are crawling back to live off our wallet, huh?" The laughter froze for a beat, then rose again, louder, harsher. I traced the stem of my wine glass with a calm fingertip and watched the swirl of the room as though from a distance. The stage is almost set. Mother struck next, her voice laced with contempt. Unmarried, no children, no value as a woman. What exactly were you trying to prove? An aunt chimed in with a giggle. Perhaps she can at least help with the charity's paperwork. Catherine delivered the final jab. How pathetic. You defied father and stormed out, only to come back here empty-handed. Your life is one big failure. Their jeers spread like a wave across the table. Only the fireplace kept crackling softly, like a quiet drumbeat for the coming storm. I set down my glass and folded my napkin neatly on my lap. That small change in movement silenced a few chuckles. The smell of wine, the scent of herbs crisping on the roast, the dry heat of the fire, all of it receded until only the tingling in my fingertips felt vividly real. From my bag, I drew a thick envelope and dropped it onto the table. The thud of paper against wood echoed off the ceiling. The tremor in the room came not from my hand, but from the shift in everyone's gaze. What's the meaning of this? Father's voice was low, half a beat late. I unclasped the envelope and fanned out the papers across the white tablecloth. Stock transfer notices, acquisition records, memos of consent from partner firms, debt assignment agreements. On the linen, they looked less like paper, more like a cold map of power. This, I said evenly, eyes fixed on my father, is reality. Jason was the first to break. He shoved back his chair with a clatter and shot to his feet. Ridiculous. You think a stack of papers can move our empire? I lifted one sheet between two fingers and let it dangle lightly. A stack of papers, yes. But these papers tell the banks what to do, the partners where to stand, and the board which way to vote. Mother's voice trembled as she tried to intervene. Stop this childish game. Who is behind all this? Who matters less than what? I replied, my gaze sweeping the table. What matters is that the decisions have already been made. And Uncle scoffed, holding a document up to the light. The seal is real, but how did you raise this kind of capital? Questions later, I cut in. Let's keep the order of things. I slid a chart toward my father. It shows how, over the last year, the critical veins around Adam's software have been quietly rerouted. A deeper crease formed between father's brows as he flipped through the pages. Each time his hand paused, the only sound was the pop of the burning logs. Supplier replacement credit lines shifted shared infrastructure, he muttered hoarsely. Jason slammed a fist on the table. This is a backdoor takeover. Not a backdoor, I answered. A perfectly legal front door. You just never noticed it was there. I opened a second envelope, and here, these are the final buyout terms. Closing is set for tomorrow morning at 9. The notices have already gone out. Catherine's fingers shook around her phone. But there's nothing on the news, nothing online. There doesn't need to be, I said calmly. Until noon's official announcement, everything moves quietly and precisely. Who's the buyer? Father asked at last. Everest Corp, I replied. The very company you once dismissed as insignificant. The one built on cloud integration. The same technology you called a toy. A ripple of whispers spread around the table. Someone guessed names. Others shook their heads. I only said, no one needs to know who leads Everest Corp. Let the world keep wondering. That mystery works in our favor. Mother searched my face, her voice almost pleading. Are you hiding something from us? I'm not hiding, I said softly. I'm simply guiding what people choose to see. If your own family valued reputation over truth, how would you confront them? Share your thoughts in the comments. The dining room tension spilled into whispers as Father rose from the table. Enough. We'll talk where it should be talked, my study, he said, his voice low but decisive. I stood as well and followed half a step behind him. The chatter of relatives faded as the heavy doors closed behind us. The carpet in the corridor muffled our footsteps. Light from the chandeliers stretched our shadows long across the walls. Behind us, I heard fragments of panic. Call the lawyer. Get the press involved. We can't let her. All those voices blurred into the distance. At the threshold of the study, I glanced back once. Catherine sat with her face in her hands. Mother stood frozen, lips pressed tight. Jason's jaw was clenched, his fist whitening around a wine glass. The heavy door shut with a dull thud, sealing Father and me into a room of different air. The scent of leather, old paper, ink, and the soft warmth of the banker's lamp. Father stood behind his desk. I deliberately remained standing, one hand resting lightly on the edge of the desk. 10 years ago, this room had been off limits to me. Tonight I stood as an equal, eye to eye. Let's get to the point, Father said, taking off his glasses. The buyer, Everest Corp. You know who's behind it? I do, I replied. But it's not for the public to know. Not even your family? You, of all people, know that family often talks too freely. His mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. Not quite anger. He opened a drawer and drew out a thick stack of papers bearing the Everest Triangle logo. I watched the pages in silence. He changed the question. Is this all just personal revenge against me? No, I said, shaking my head. If it were revenge, I wouldn't have designed such a careful soft landing. I'd built a plan to keep your name, the company's legacy, and its dignity intact. For the first time, a flicker of surprise crossed his eyes. Keep the name? Yes. The name stays. The form changes. We'll seal the past into a monument and give the future freedom to move. I laid a slim envelope on the desk. A proposal for an honorary post. It preserves your title, your say in ceremonial matters, and your reputation, while releasing you from day-to-day operations. A figurehead then, he murmured. Not a figurehead, an emblem. You remain as the symbol, while the younger engineers lead the work. 10 years ago, you denied me that seat at the table. Now I intend to offer that seat to the next generation. Father lowered his gaze to the grain of the wooden desk. The silence in the room felt almost physical, less like sinking, more like the air itself growing dense. I drew another document from my bag. And one more thing, Jason. His pupils narrowed a fraction. I continued evenly. $300,000. False invoices. Payment logs. The transfer routes. I haven't taken it outside the company yet. His hands curled into fists. Evidence? More than enough, I answered quietly. But I'm willing not to use it. If he's willing to repay the money, resign, and start over. If he chooses to redeem himself, I'll give him that chance. You're giving me the choice? You and him, I said, holding his gaze. Being family doesn't grant immunity. If it were your own family caught in wrongdoing, would you hide it, expose it, or step back? What would you choose? Share your answer in the comments. Father crossed his arms and finally sat down, his fingers tracing the wood grain as he looked back up at me. Tell me the terms. I laid out 3 envelopes side by side, one describing his honorary position, one detailing Jason's path to make amends, and one, the full transition plan for people, capital, and infrastructure. Choose, I said quietly. Fight to keep the past or stay to help build what remains. The lamplight slid along the paper's edge, drawing a thin line of gold across the desk. Father stayed motionless for a long while. Only that narrow line trembled. Through the closed door came the faint chime of cutlery from the dining room. Time outside moved on, but in here the clock seemed to run at a different speed. Finally he stood. Let's go back. I'll say what needs saying in front of them, my words, not yours. I nodded. I'll speak for myself as well. We stepped back into the hall. The temperature seemed to change instantly. All the murmurs, all the eyes, all the scents of food and wine rushed toward us at once. I walked half a pace behind my father until we reached the table. His hand trembled slightly as he lifted his glass. Quiet, he commanded, his voice falling heavy from the ceiling. I have something to say about this family, this company, and the future. Jason slammed a palm on the table. Father, you don't have to go along with her farce. Throw her out right now. Father shot him a sharp glance. Be silent. For once. Just listen. I held up the envelope again and spoke after him. These documents show a reality that can't be reversed. Tomorrow's signatures will transfer controlling shares of Atom Software to Everest Corp. Catherine's face went pale. Is it really over? It's not the end, I told her gently. Only a change of form. And Uncle still protested. Even if the name remains, the power will be stripped away, won't it? What matters, I replied, is to keep what must be preserved and change what must be changed. Up to now, we've done the opposite. Father rose to his feet and looked slowly around the table. Tonight I've learned truths I should have faced long ago. 10 years back, I mocked my daughter's vision out of fear of the future. The times outran me, and my daughter surpassed me. Jason snapped back angrily. Have you lost your mind? She's a traitor. Father's glare cut him short. Which of us betrayed this house? You claimed to protect it, but numbers and trust were corroded under your watch. Jason's face flushed crimson. He kicked his chair back and half stood, then slumped down wordless. Mother clenched her napkin, unable to lift her head. I drew a slow breath and spoke quietly. I didn't return for revenge. I came back to reclaim the right to build a future, the right this family once denied me. If you were in Morgan's place, would you offer a fallen sibling the chance to start again or shut them out? Write your thoughts below. The night stretched long after the last glass was emptied. Lawyers drafted the closing documents in another room. Relatives whispered, still stunned by the shift in power. Father remained at the head of the table, silent yet oddly calm, as if some heavy weight had finally slid from his shoulders. Jason slipped out of the dining room without a word. No one stopped him. Mother dabbed her eyes with a corner of her napkin, then quietly excused herself as well. I stayed until the last signature was placed. When the clock struck midnight, the ink was dry, and the empire called Adams Software officially changed shape. The family's name remained engraved on the glass doors, but its lifeblood now flowed toward a new summit. At dawn, I stood alone on the balcony, looking across the white frosted garden. The winter sky was streaked with faint gold. The city beyond the river was waking under thin trails of chimney smoke. I rested both hands on the iron railing and let the cold bite my skin awake. The night's adrenaline ebbed away, leaving a stillness inside me. It was not the hollow ache of revenge, but a strange, quiet peace, as if something that had been locked tight for years had finally been set down. Footsteps crunched lightly across the balcony tiles. Father appeared beside me holding 2 cups of steaming coffee. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, he said, I misjudged you, Morgan, and I misjudged the times. You built something greater than I ever imagined. I accepted the cup and let the warmth seep into my fingers. I didn't want to destroy you, Father. I wanted to prove that I could build, that the future you called a toy could be real. He gave a short, rough laugh. You proved it, perhaps too well. A brief silence stretched between us, filled only by the morning breeze and the far-off toll of a church bell. Jason will need to face the consequences, I said quietly. I'll make sure he's given the chance to make amends. Nothing more, nothing less. Father nodded once. That's fair. Better than I deserve. The words hung in the air. For the first time, I felt that the distance between us had shifted. Not erased, but no longer impossible to cross. As the sun rose fully over the horizon, its pale light caught on the frost-covered lawn, scattering 1,000 points of silver back toward the house. I thought of the girl I had been 10 years ago, frustrated, humiliated, dismissed. She was gone now. In her place stood a woman who had learned that power is not in the noise of triumph, but in the calm of a choice finally her own. The future belongs to those who dare to keep building, even when no one believes in them. If you've ever fought to prove yourself against doubt or dismissal, share your story in the comments. Your voice may inspire someone else to keep building. Remember to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next chapter in our series of real-life business dramas.